Yes, Martin has turned on the recording. So welcome to Coffee with a Purpose. Welcome to 2025. I have no idea how it could already be this far along in the 21st century. This is ridiculous. But anyway, I'm so happy for this community and excited about our first speaker. Jessie, you may or may not have heard this, but Matt Rain, sorry for our phone ringing. Sarah's about to get it. Um, sorry. Your executive director happened to be preaching the sermon at First Congregational Church yesterday. So I was very happy to get a chance to meet him and learn a little bit about your organization, but certainly happy for you to be here and tell us all about it, and including apparently extremely late breaking news about potentially the acquisition of a property. So we'll start with our usual custom of having the folks here do a brief introduction to themselves. Some of that has probably been happening informally already, but let's start right there at MetroWorks. If people could introduce themselves to Jessie.
Why don't we start with Cindy and go around?
I'm Cindy Bates, class of '78 at Weston High School.
Yes, thank you to Cindy for connecting us with Jessie.
And Native resident for 5 years. I'm a trail steward and Keep Native Beautiful volunteer.
I'm Donna McKenzie, and I'm a town meeting member and former school committee member, and I'm on the Charter Bylaw Review Committee, and I've gotten involved in Eco-Natick. I'm just kind of a gadfly at this point.
You understand that.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm Jillian Wilson-Martin. I'm the town sustainability director, and I came today because we work with Framingham a lot with their ESL program, and we have this initiative focused on helping low-income people and renters and people who don't speak English as their first language, connecting with energy efficiency programs. So I wanted to learn more about you guys, and I thought maybe we could partner in the future.
Sounds like, thank you.
I'm Martin Kessel. I'm co-host of the Coffee with a Purpose session, and a lot of roles in town, but I'll town meeting and et cetera, et cetera. I'll leave them all today.
Thank you.
Bill Ramage, quick factoid, since we were talking about geothermal, my father built the first solar home in Dutchess County in the 1960s. It was a total failure as far as the active stuff, but he built a lot of passive and it works fantastically. Sun would come in the winter, not in the summer, that kind of thing, the way he built it. In town, I'm active on the Community Preservation Committee. I'm a trail steward and active in the church.
Great.
That your boss spoke at yesterday.
Okay, you're the one. All right.
I'm Gail Weston Roberts, and lived in Natick for 21 years now. We also live in an ancient drafty house that is going to be very difficult to make more energy efficient. Yeah, so I'm on Natick Town Democrats, and I'm going to run for a town meeting. And I just, want to hear more from everybody else about what I care about, what I'm concerned about, what I'm hoping for, but I'm hoping to hear more from everybody else.
That's it for here.
Thanks. Let's see. And moving across, Sarah, you're back on camera.
Oh, hello. I'm Sarah. I think I heard somebody, I was off screen, so I didn't see who it was, say they're kind of an all-around town gadfly. That's probably me. Also, on town meeting, community preservation committee, active at my church, Eco-Natick, I'm a retired hazardous waste site cleanup person. Anyway, so that's me. Welcome.
Great. Polly?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm work for the town of Natick. I'm a veteran services director for Natick and a couple other communities, and I'm also do work with veterans therapy, and I'm also on the board of the Veterans Treatment Corps for Middlesex County, which is a great program. I don't think we've been on yet, Doug, but Sarah, but I'd love to talk about, and I'll bring a new a new judge to a Coffee for the Purpose in the spring.
Sounds good. Great. Thanks. Kathleen. You're on mute, Kathleen.
Clearly, I need another cup of coffee this morning. Again, I'm Kathleen Donovan. I'm a 34-year resident of Natick. I serve on the Library Board of Trustees, and I also volunteer with Keep Natick Beautiful. And I think I probably have an interest in any speaker who shows up who supports any group or resident in our community, because that is the mission of the library, is to support everybody. So very interested to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Kathleen. Pat?
Good morning. Pat Conaway, Keep Natick Beautiful.
Thanks, Pat. Sally?
Hi, I'm Pat's sister, and I moved from California, and Pat put me to work on Keep Natick Beautiful. But I love Natick, and I'm always interested in what Doug and Martin have got for our program. So welcome.
Thanks, Sally. Janchi?
Yeah, I'm Shamsi Monar. I'm more than 25 years resident of Natick. I retired about a year ago or 2 years ago from pharmaceutical biotech companies. And I'm happy to be here.
I love your leaf sculpture behind you.
I
That is amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is my green room. I love to sit here.
Judy?
Hey everybody, Judy Dixon. I am the housing equity advocate at Family Promise Metro West. Longtime Natick resident, have worked in recreation and education in the town. Also a member of FCC Natick, where your organization presented yesterday, although I wasn't able to be there. So your information will be all fresh and new to me. And in my role as a liaison to Family Promise, I hope to hear about opportunities you may offer for the many multilingual families that we work with. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Carol?
Good morning, Carol Berkowitz, and I live on Lake Achitchewit, so I have concerned for many years about the lake and a former town meeting member, and thank you for coming this morning.
Thanks, Carol. And Brinley?
Good morning, Brinley Vickers. 24-ish maybe year resident, also a town meeting member, also likes to pay attention to everything. My biggest interests are school committee and school business, because I still have kids in the school, and Eco-Natick.
Great. Thanks, Brinley. And I'm Doug. I moderate this group and am active in First Congregational Church, mostly trying to keep that old building upright. So anyway, welcome, Jessie. So glad to have you with us. So we'll turn it over to you, and you can choose. I know you said you didn't have presentations to share on the screen or anything. We can just do this as informal dialogue. If you want folks to hold questions, we can do that too, but however you're most comfortable.
Yeah, what I thought I would do is just kind of the history of Hospitality Common and how we became who we are. And maybe hold questions till the end, it'd be the easiest, then I can do that. Sure. But I'm Jessie Robinson. I grew up in Weston, class of 77. So Cindy and I go way back, and we got reacquainted over the summer at a reunion. And we used to sing together. I majored in music. Currently, I am an interpretive guide at Louisa May Alcott's Orchard House in Concord. So I understand old drafty houses, and we are geothermal. So I feel like I have so much overlap with all of you already. I'm just loving this group. This is wonderful. So Hospitality Common. Oh, also I'm married with 3 grown children and a grandson, 2 years old, very important in Texas. I am an interpretive guide. And I'm on the staff of Hospitality Common. I'm also a founding board member. So I am just going to start and give you the whole background. And again, the overlap already is remarkable. This is exciting. So Hospitality Common Inc., we call ourselves HCI, is a faith-based nonprofit organization providing educational and charitable programs and services to marginalized and underserved communities. And way back in 2017, Matt, who Doug met yesterday, was our youth director at Presbyterian Church in Sudbury, where I'm very active. And he, in that capacity, went to a Sudbury clergy meeting where he heard a speaker, and the speaker was Gary Moorhead, who was back from Afghanistan. And Gary had been there for 8 years. He loves hospitality, and he knew the Afghan people were so warm and gracious and hospitable. He really wanted to learn from them. And while he was there, he started a nonprofit to help Afghan refugees who'd been displaced return home and repatriate. And he worked with them for 8 years. And then the political climate changed and he had to return to the States. And he thought, what can I do to help immigrants and refugees in this area? And he started researching what he called hospitality houses. At the time, there were only 8 in the entire, 12 in the entire country. In fact, all of North America, including Canada. And when refugees come through channels, they are placed in hotels, cheap apartments, sometimes private homes. A person might have a guest room that they want to use for this purpose, and the family will welcome 1 or 2 immigrants in. But those were kind of the options, and hospitality houses offer something different. It's a house specifically, private home, but specifically designed for refugees. And it will have 1 or 2 people who live there as staff, head residents. One case I know of, they actually own the house and just chose to do this. But housing up to maybe 12 refugees, singles, families, couples, all different ones together from all different locations, as a safe resting place for 3 to 9 months until these visitors get their feet on the ground, learn the resources in the area, and then they move on to something else. So it's just a more welcoming hospital situation. And so Gary wanted to build one in Metro West. And he did a lot of research. He actually lived in one of the Canadian ones for a year. And he started doing a paper on best practices for all 12 houses continent-wide. And it's at that point he shared, and Matt heard that conversation. Well, Matt came back to our church, and we have a member, Aileen, who in 2017 was very concerned about our political climate and the change in administration and what's going to happen to all the immigrants. She herself is a Scottish immigrant. She's been here for decades, really passionate about people from other nations. And so she was venting to Matt, and Matt said, "You've got to meet Gary." And so the 3 of them got together and had a meeting, and they said, "Yeah, we need to build one of these houses." Well, Gary brought it to our church leadership, which I was on. And my background, for many years, I have just felt called to get a big old colonial house, use my love of domestic arts, gift of hospitality, knowledge of the tourism industry, to create a house of healing for people such as survivors of domestic violence, those working through post-traumatic stress disorder, travelers in need of welcome and peace, high school exchange students. So through nurture, nutrition, and God's abundant love, I just wanted to create a resting place for the soul. And I envisioned, having a garden out back, which would provide food for the house, but also be a real healing space for people. So that's what I saw. And I felt I'd been getting prepared for this my whole life. I have loved working in nutrition since I was about 12. I have a daughter now 38 who was in chemotherapy ages 12 to 14 with a brain tumor. Thank you, Jimmy Fund. I have a son who was a Marine serving in Iraq and returned with post-traumatic stress disorder, which took a few years to diagnose and treat. Thank you, Paul, for your hard work. I worked in home health and became certified as a personal care attendant. I have dealt with domestic abuse in my first marriage and became certified as a state certified as a domestic violence counselor. And as I said, I've just been fascinated with cooking nutritious foods for a long time. So all of these things together, I felt like I was being trained for this. I never got the house. I've moved around, I have an apartment, I never had the property. And so I heard Matt sharing, and my heart, I just sang. I could barely get through the meeting. I raced over to him and I said, "I don't know what you are doing, but I have got to be a part of it. Count me in." And so interestingly, refugees were never on my radar. But when I started thinking about it, they need help navigating the community. They need help with nutrition. They are dealing with trauma, all of these things. So I signed on, and the 5 of us began meeting weekly. figuring out how can we build a home in Metro West to serve this need. And continuing to share, another church member, Christine, was a corporate executive. And she was just really frustrated with both sides of the political divide, arguing who is in charge of these immigrants, whose fault is it, who can we blame? And she said, I want to become part of the solution. And so she signed on. The 5 of us became the original board of Hospitality Common, Inc. And as many of you may know, it takes a long time to get a nonprofit going. I had no idea. And so during that process,
That's you.
so Matt,
Yeah.
Gary, Aileen, me, and Christine.
Thank you.
And so we were in this process. Christine became our first president with her executive experience. She was really good at that. While networking, Matt, who's very good at that, met Crystal. Now, Crystal and her husband had previously run a school. They are people of color, and they wanted to they had lost their school because the property was taken for something else. And they wanted to build another school with focus on STEM education and actually STEM therapy, which Michael is patenting a program in this to help underserved and minority youth. And we just loved them. And Crystal came on board as our next board member, very experienced in grant writing, which was a huge help. And so at this point, we came up with a 3-fold purpose: the school, the house, and the third purpose was to educate the community and engage them in our purpose, so that we would not be often isolated. We just wanted to engage the community. So we finally became an official nonprofit in 2019, and then the pandemic hit. So what to do? We had already gotten very involved in a lot of the social services in Framingham. And we went to each of them. I know you've had Lino speak to you from Jewish Family Services before, and said, what can we do for you during COVID? What are your needs? And they said, we need more English as a second language teachers. And we need them at night. Because many of the immigrants are working. And at this time, Reverend Lloyd from Greater Framingham Community Church, walked into our lives. And you may know, it's that big old elephant of a church with the pillars right by the train station. It's huge. And he was looking to rent out space in the building during the shutdown. And so we did that. We rented space. We started ESL classes, originally Monday, Wednesday, Friday nights. And originally with children, that got a little bit difficult because of one specific situation. And we're now Monday and Wednesday nights only. So we started doing that with the help of a lot of volunteers. We hired a professional ESL teacher to kind of coach us through everything. Since 2021, we have taught 350 students from 15 different countries. Our classes have been highly acclaimed because we meet in person rather than on Zoom. So these relationships between the students and each other and the staff are continually being forged and built. My favorite stories, we had Ukrainian students and they would treat the staff. They brought us chocolates over the Christmas holidays and homemade Ukrainian Pascha bread, during Ukrainian Easter, and treated us. They came back and attended our last graduation ceremony, even though they had no Ukrainians in that group. They just wanted to come back and be a presence and a support. I loved that. We have had mostly South American students, and one of them was a musician. He entertained at one of our community outreach events, came back and performed. And my very favorite story, we had a couple of Afghan men at one point, and one of them, he had really escaped Afghanistan with his family, wife and 3 kids, and his wife was executed on the way over. So the poor man arrives, himself traumatized, 3 boys who were just, totally traumatized. No English, and one of the first things he did, I think Jewish Family Services recommended him. He came to our classes, and he brought his prayer mat, and he would leave during classes and go pray and come back. And I love that he felt present enough and safe enough to go do that, and that we as a Christian organization felt comfortable having that go on. And it was such a beautiful bridge building experience. I love that. So now we also began a dinner program in 2021, of which I am the food services administrator. So that's my paid staff position. Believing that miracles happen when we gather around the table and break bread together. We began at the very beginning having meals. And of course, the plan was to sit around the table and break bread together and get to know each other before each class. And we did begin that way for the first few weeks. And then the pandemic got worse. And we weren't allowed to eat together. We weren't allowed to have classes without masks. And we got really tight. We kept meeting, but we were very strict about that. And so we, instead of going from snacks each week, we went to meal, or each night, we went meals Monday night only. 3-course meals, packed up in takeaway containers. I got Serve Safe certified, so I could do all that. And that church had a good kitchen. And we did so well, we got a grant to feed all their families as well. And so last year alone, I personally did 1,500 meals with a couple of volunteers. Yeah. And I make sure all of the components are healthy, frugal, delicious, and have an international appeal. And in fact, we wrote a cookbook.
Wow.
Gathering around the table with hospitality common. And each of these recipes has been either served to our students or was a recipe contributed by one of our volunteers. And as I said, they're all nutritious, affordable. The book represents 25 different countries. Many of them are vegetarian and gluten-free. The suggested cost is $30 per book, but a donation of any kind today will get you a book. So what is HCI up to now? And you said, Doug, that Matt had mentioned this. So January term begins tonight. They're getting, we don't know the numbers yet. So tonight they get a squash or get a snack. I've got pumpkin bread pudding ready to go. Got to squeeze in those vegetables where I can. So January term is a 4-week intensive class for brand new students. It tends to be about 15 students. And then the next 12-week semester begins in February. That'll be classes twice a week with meals to the students and sent home to their families on Monday nights. Matt gave me the numbers and I forgot to write those down. We had our highest average last semester and our highest, there was lowest attrition last semester. I think we were averaging 20 students a week and had maybe 40 registered. So we really did very, very well last semester. So we have the classes going on. We have our Passion in Action forums trying to educate, as I said, the community. And a lot of overlap with what you guys have talked about. We've had a speaker on housing. We've had a speaker on food insecurity. We also open up our graduation, holiday, and staff appreciation events to the public. So that's again how we do a lot of our fundraising is bringing people to these events. We have recently added another board member, Daniel, who was a former member of our staff, and then he moved to Florida for a while. He came back. He is an immigrant from India. He is now a board certified lawyer practicing immigration law in the Boston area. So we are delighted to have him back. So immigrant on our board and a new lawyer, and just fabulous. And yes, we are in the process of settling at last on a home to purchase for our hospitality house. Now, we were looking at one for a long time, and this was in Framingham, both of them are in Framingham. Beautiful 5-bedroom private home, woman who was strong Christian, involved at GFCC, really on board with their mission, wanted badly to sell her house to us. Only the tenants wouldn't leave for a long time. So this has been an ongoing process. It's now taken, they've had to go after it legally. So meanwhile, while we were hoping that might still be an option, we found also in Framingham, I don't know if you know the Sisters of Mary, it's a monastery, big property, up on a hill, kind of off of near Route 9, overlooks. If you're driving west on Route 9, you see the big cross, it's them. They are down to 1 monk and he has moved out, and they still have a board of directors and you know, they own the property. They are looking to rent part of that space, and they've already rented out one of their buildings, but they have a building that would function as a school. Looks kind of like that church right there. And then they have this house, 9 bedrooms upstairs, 5 bedrooms in the attic, a huge kitchen, probably 9 bathrooms. Beautiful building from the 1920s. Wow. And we've toured it. It's just wonderful. so that conversation is going on. It needs more work, but we just had the inspection and it was surprisingly sound. I mean, it's got lead and it's got, you know, electricity, things that need to be upgraded. But so those two things are now very real options. And on the first one, I think the tenants are finally leaving. So now we have to figure out which one are we meant to have. The big one where it's a rental, you know, how many hundreds of thousands are we willing to invest for the upkeep without owning, and you know, what are the ramifications there? And then the other one, is that a better option, although it's smaller? So yeah, that's where we stand. So further ways you can join. Oh, let's see. Yeah, those were the two. We are working on updating our webpage, Facebook and Instagram. We've lost our media person and I tried to help a little bit. I'm pretty good at Facebook, but not Instagram or anything else. So you're welcome to check us out at those places. It's www.hospitalitycommon with no s.org. But you might also see that maybe we need some help there. And if you know anyone involved in media, that's one place we could use a volunteer. Also as teachers, you mentioned ESL people, that would be wonderful. We currently have 3 different levels of programming for the ESL. So teachers, media, and food prep. I have one regular volunteer. I've had a couple of others off and on. And right now I'm not preparing at GFCC. I now prepare at my church in Sudbury, and then we take the food over. And that was a kitchen situation. So, and of course, donations. Again, you can go through our webpage or through me. Now I'm ready for questions.
I'm wondering if Doug can put up your website, just to show the website a little bit.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Can you do that, Doug?
Yeah, hang on a second.
Hospitalitycommon.org. Thanks.
Let's see.
I put it in the chat, Doug.
Yeah, no, I had already brought it up. Are people seeing that on the screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there I am in the center with Daphne in front.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Wow. Who's this big group of people here?
That's our last graduation, or one of the graduations, may not be the last.
Yeah.
Can people come back? If they
Yeah,
need
they
to?
do.
Okay.
We have 3 different levels of classes, and so sometimes they'll just graduate to the next one.
Yep, yep.
And there you can see what the dinner program.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing.
That production line there.
Yeah. Kelly is my Brazilian volunteer.
As you told your story, Jessie, one of the fascinating things to me is how you have this initial grounding vision of providing a home, but that's events conspired to make that not possible initially. So rather than sit back, you guys just kind of said, well, how else can we help?
Yeah, there was so much need.
Launch these other programs. That's very inspiring, I think.
Thank you. One thought we had during that time, and that was sort of accounting for the delay, was we heard there were, you know, these pods of education where people would get together and help students. And we really looked into that for a while. And by the time we were sorting that out, then this other opportunity came and we just watched it. So it's been a long process, but we met consistently that whole time. Yeah.
In terms of needing more ESL teachers, one of the things Matt said yesterday was he also echoed that need. And he said, you know, don't worry if you don't speak another language. You know, we can make it work. How does that work? How does one become an ESL teacher without speaking anything else?
I do the food side of things. My sister's an ESL teacher, or was in Europe, and you probably can help too. My understanding is you don't really need to know the language. You work through we have a curriculum, and a lot of it's done on whiteboards and hands-on and just talking with each other. Certainly when we've had Spanish-speaking people, they might translate for their friends or the Ukrainians. We had one person from Israel. I mean, nobody could translate, you know, and so we make it work. But can you speak to ESL?
I'm not an ESL teacher.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
we've partnered.
I can speak a little bit to it. I was a bilingual teacher back in the day, and actually an ESL model does not do any translation, concurrent translation, or use in its model, or use heritage language in the course of education. It's an immersion program, and that's actually what we have in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts now. The opposite would be called bilingual transitional education, and then you would need a critical mass of people speaking the same language, right? So that, because an educator would know their heritage language and would know English, and then you can do education that way. But just chiming in on that. So it's not different than what is happening in schools for young people who are new to our area.
We do focus on certain subjects, especially January term and June term. We do it like it's an intensive. And so one has been food. How do you navigate grocery stores? How do you describe that you have an allergy? How do you cope in restaurants? And then last summer it was all medical. How do you deal with medical protocols and the system? And so that was very focused, and I enjoyed that. And I guess the other thing to say about volunteers is you don't have to do both Monday and Wednesday. You can do Monday or Wednesday.
I have a bunch of questions. Can we ask questions?
Go ahead, Julie. Yeah.
My two big questions are, one, like, what happens to the immigrants that you're working with? Like, do they end up living in Metro West, or like, what is their time like here? And like, how do you transition out of their lives? Or I don't know, I'm curious about their path and like where they're living, since they're not living with you right now. And then kind of related to that, more like the beginning of their path, I'm wondering how you guys actually connect with them.
Yeah.
Like, is it through the Jewish, you mentioned that Jewish organization?
Right, the end is hard for me to say because I'm really usually in the kitchen. And I see them at graduation and holiday, and I don't have a lot of encounter with them. But certainly some do come back. I know some are living, many of them in one home, because I know how many meals go home per family. But others have been here for years. We had some in our first class. I think they've been here 20 years and they never needed to learn another language because they had people who spoke their own language. And for the first time, they were learning to, because they knew it would, help them increase things. Most of them come through legal channels, so that the refugee organizations that do that, Jewish Family Services, Catholic Charities, and I think there's one other big one. So they come through that way, and either are recommended. So we first found them, I think, kind of by advertising through different churches and things. And then word gets out. But also these organizations like Lino at JFS definitely has forwarded people to us. So that's been really helpful. And I will say, we are a Christian board. And we require that board members have a relationship with Christ. We do not require that of staff, as long as they understand we're going to pray before meetings. And we are very happy to work with any immigrants out there. As I said, we worked with our Afghan friend. We want to help who needs help. So we are very, non-judgmental. We are absolutely not trying to convert anybody to anything. So.
Did you have other questions, Dylan, or others in the room?
Just to follow up on, does it matter somebody's legal status to you?
Great question. We decided as a board that when we have the house, they must be documented. But for the classes, we don't check. It'd be really hard to follow up, and we don't know who is in their house at home. And so we do ask, would they allow us to put them in photographs? And certainly we have, forms, so we know their background, their address, or not background so much, but what country do they come from, health information, if they have an allergy to the food. So that's all in there. And we ask if they're comfortable being photographed. But we don't ask for that program. But when we do the house, we have agreed they must be documented, because what if someone would come to the door in the middle of the night and, there could be too many factors, plus some people on our board. It would be ramifications for them legally, so.
Paul, I see you've got your hand up. I'm going to come off mute.
Yes, thank you, Doug. I want to say, first of all, thank you for the great work that you do in the community. You an inspiration to all of us.
You too.
Thank you. I love your mission. and I'm gonna try to get involved a little more with the mission if you accept me.
Hmm.
And I, whatever capacity you want, I am a therapist. I deal a lot with PTSD, and other stresses. Uh, I help veterans, but I'm willing to help anybody, and I support the welcoming of people to our community. I know as a grandson of 4 Irish immigrants that they started in this country through Ellis Island. They're a little different than now, but they were immigrants, and I know a little enough about each one of their journeys from Ellis Island to eventually Cambridge, Arlington, Somerville, Massachusetts. So, yeah, I just want to give you a kudos and tell your son thank you very much for his service and welcome home.
Thank you. Are you a vet yourself?
I'm a 12-year Marine Corps vet.
Oh, wonderful. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
So for my son, it was the vets who got him through. It was the Vietnam vets who were the ones who really could relate to Jeremy.
Well,
And
that's who I'm
with them.
associated with. I'm a life member of Vietnam Veterans of America and a National Service Officer with Vietnam.
Welcome to you.
Tell your son he's welcome in my office anytime.
Thank you. Thank you. He's in Texas, but I would love to introduce you guys. And I would love to work with you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good connection to have made. Jessie, I know you don't yet have the housing, firmly in place, but can you say anything more about what you envision the model to be, or how it works with the other established houses? Are there multiple family units in the property at the same time sharing the space? Is there kind of a defined length of time that you would be trying to provide the housing for, and then as a bridge to to something else? What more can you tell us about that piece?
Envision 3 to 9 months. We are open to having singles, families, and couples. My understanding is it can be tricky depending on what countries they're from. It can be tricky depending what kind of trauma they have been through. How many people so I think we'll have to play some of that by ear, and it'd be great to have a therapist on board to help us through some of those things. What was I gonna say? So the one house I have visited, there's a place up in Salem called the House of Peace. And it's a beautiful, big old Victorian or maybe even colonial mansion. And that is owned by a couple. They've been doing this for probably 30 years now. So they bought that house with the intention of making it a refugee home, but it is also their home. And they've had well over 1,000 refugees through, I think. And their focus is also people with physical disabilities, children who have been through physical problems. So they have a very specific purpose. So some of them stay longer, but wow, they had an attached carriage house and a loft upstairs where people could do dramatic or musical presentations and work their gifts, sharing with each other and with the community. I loved that. They had a chapel that was multi-faith. So it had a Buddha symbol over here and a cross over here and Hebrew things and Muslim, so everybody could worship the way they want, I would love to see things like that. It all depends on the size of the house. But yeah, so initially it was helping people get comfortable in the area, getting them some ESL, getting them resources. We picked Framingham because of public transportation as well as need. So that if, we don't envision being the people to drive them everywhere. Maybe volunteers will help with that. That is not going to be the job of the staff person staying at the house. But getting them hooked up with these different things, helping them navigate some of those. And then adding the school in, it'd be lovely to get a property where the school could be the same place. And meanwhile, we don't necessarily want to give up the ESL program now that it's been so successful. Both of these properties have great rooms that could be schoolrooms, classrooms. So we could still keep it up. I don't know if it would be the same number of people. And yeah, the food would now be on site. So I've talked with the House of Peace people. I'm like, am I now gonna go from one big meal a week to, 21 meals a week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And they said, no, they have a group meal once or twice a week. And the people keep their own things in the refrigerator and they cook for themselves. Sometimes they cook for each other. I just think food is such a great way to get to know each other and each other's cultures. So I would love not to live on site. I'm married and that's not my goal. But I would love to engage more with the food. And so then we need to sort out, do we get 2 refrigerators, one for them, one for me? So all of that is in the works and needs to be figured out. Talking with the people up in Ipswich has been a big help and they're a terrific resource for us.
Great.
So, and then when Gary was doing his research, a lot of that, he has it on paper. I need to go back to that.
I see Judy's got her hand up, and then after that, Ricky. Judy?
Hey, so as I'm listening to this, Jessie, Family Promise Metro West has a shelter where we house 3 families at a time with individual bedrooms for each family and shared living, kitchen, dining space, as well as a playroom downstairs for kiddos. And our offices are attached in the front and upstairs of the building. We also have an on-site apartment where our residential director lives, who basically is on duty in the overnights. It just sounds like there are so many overlaps to what you are setting out to set up that I would encourage you folks to reach out to us, come for a site visit, come meet our shelter director and our support team. I think that there's lots to be learned both ways. So I would just invite you to do that if you haven't already familiarized yourself with our program.
But I thought you rotated churches for the residencies.
So that is our history, and that is the model still in much of this country. But during COVID, when we housed families in area hotels, we also ran a capital campaign and converted our office into an on-site stable shelter, which is a far better model for children and families. They're already undergoing so much trauma. And so, yeah, and so now we're also engaging in some creative transitional housing situations out in the community. We have another church in Sudbury that wasn't using all of its space. And so we have a 5-bedroom home where we're setting up sort of a little bit more independent transitional model. And we're also sublease apartments in the community so that we have flexibility as families may become eligible for other programs to support their housing needs. They don't have to worry about breaking a lease and how are they going to be held to the lease they're in. So there's just lots, I think, that we could collaborate on.
That aspect of rotating churches, Judy, you might want to say a little bit more about that because it might tie into some of what Jessie was saying of, oh my gosh, do I have to provide 21 meals a week? Isn't it true now that rather than provide round robin housing, churches sign up to kind of provide a week's worth of some on-site support and other types of support, right?
So we churches that were host churches sign up for still in a weekly rotation, and they get a shopping list where they're invited to provide some or all of the weekly shopping list, which we customize with the families that we have on site at the time. And congregations still enjoy sharing that
Right, we had some members
prepared meals. So we do that a couple times a week, but we have backed away from the community dinner with congregations. We found that our families kind of felt a sense of further trauma by being sort of put on display by people coming into what is right now their home, which could be quite different if you're the person, right? If you're the person preparing and you're familiar to the folks and you're having an ongoing relationship, that I think that would be quite different. I'm also really interested in and think that our team would be really interested in your efforts to make food culturally relevant to the families that you're serving, because we've done that as well. Like our Thanksgiving basket did not include cranberries and stuffing. It included rice and beans and those types of things. So nevertheless, we have our fair share of lasagnas come through the door because that's what congregations know how to do well. So we've talked about perhaps wanting to have some sort of like cooking classes for our congregation partners, where folks from a wide array of our congregations might come and learn a few dishes that might be a little bit more culturally relevant to a specific culture, or maybe more generalized and more appetizing to a wider array of folks from around the world. But so I think that we could talk a little bit about that. That's not I'm sort of a policy person, but listening to you definitely ties into what is happening on our site.
With your permissions, maybe perhaps Judy and Jessie, I could share your email addresses with each other, just to foster that point of contact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Address, phone number, whatever.
Great. Ricky, if you want to come off mute, and welcome, by the way. Jessie, Ricky Ball is a long-time Natick resident now, living in Canton, I believe it is, but still very much a Naticker. So she joins us when she can. She's looking for her mute button.
Sometimes it can be hard to find.
She'll find it soon. See you later, Jillian.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
How long is this group in the meeting?
Pat Conaway actually started this group several years ago, pre-pandemic. And like so many things you've mentioned, Judy has mentioned, the pandemic changed everything. We kind of went fully virtual, and for the last 3 years or so, we've been fortunate to have this hybrid arrangement.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Ricky. Good
Okay. Oh, it's so good to be here. And it's particularly interesting to me to hear about this program dedicated to immigrants, because I'm one myself. I am a refugee from Vienna, Austria during the Holocaust. So I've been in America, thank God, for since 1947, when I was 10 years old. And during the war, I was fortunate enough to be in Trinidad, where they spoke English. So I didn't have the language barrier. I learned English from the time I was a year and a half old. So that's a barrier, thank God, I didn't have. But the one that my family faced for many years, and I did until 1957, was the threat of deportation. I can relate to the dreamers who came to this country as children and who never had permanent status and who lived under threat of deportation. And I'm wondering if you have any connection with legal services to help those immigrants, many of whom may have the same issues about their ability to stay in this country and to have a path to citizenship. I became a permanent resident when I married my husband at the age of, when I was 21. I came to America, I was 10. So that's how long it took me to become a permanent resident. And I'd like to say that I've made the most of my citizenship, and it's been thankfully in the town of Natick, where I spent 66 years and participated to the utmost in the civic life of the community, and still consider Natick my cultural, spiritual, and every other way home, and continue to participate there and try and help people there, because I know intimately many of the issues that they're living with.
We certainly do want to help people with a path for citizenship, if that is something they desire, and we do now have Daniel on board, who is an immigration lawyer. I can't answer what we have in place at this moment, but we certainly have that in mind, and even one of our volunteers came here, she got her PhD here, she came from Brazil, finished her PhD, and her green card expired during the pandemic and she's had trouble renewing it. And so she's at risk for deportation. And, you know, this is certainly someone like you who is contributing to society and, you know, doing so much and active in church. And, you know, I think people get a bad reputation.
I just want you to make you aware of a resource in the community concerning legal services. I don't know what immigration work they do, but it's SMOC Legal Services. They are an offshoot of the CAP agency. They did that, I think, during my term as president of SMOC. And they are a wonderful organization. And if you reach out to them, it may not just be for legal things. There may be other services that they can provide to you. So I would encourage that.
Thank you, Erica. We were in touch with them early on. I know they are one of the people who suggested we get back involved in ESL, but I'm not sure what contact we've had recently. So I'll make sure Matt or Christine reach out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lovely meeting you. Thank you for sharing.
Jessie, can you tell us more about kind of your funding model? You know, obviously you're selling cookbooks. All other kinds of donations are welcome. You mentioned a
donations
grant.
are welcome.
You
Certainly
mentioned
a
a grant
lot
earlier. Where does your funding come from primarily?
Crystal is the person to answer that. We have had some major grants. Metro West is I'm not even I'm the wrong person to ask about that, but yes, we have gotten some major grants. We did have, I can tell you this one. We received a personal grant. It was an anonymous donor. I don't know who it is, who gave us $300,000 spread over 6 years. And so every time we got 12,005, he matched it. And we have now finished it. We did earn it. And so that was, when I first heard that, I thought, how are we ever going to earn that much? And we did. We met, I think, almost everyone, and he was very generous about stretching it when we didn't. So yeah, so that was a private donation. But definitely a couple of major grants, and Crystal is just genius at writing grants. She's our education person, and so she's always working on something new. I just can't tell you who they are. Should be on the webpage.
Yeah.
If not, it should be.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
Are there other questions, comments, discussion, input? It's a very inspiring story.
Thank you.
You each have come to it, you know, through your own trajectory. And again, I go back to what I said at the outset, your willingness to kind of change midstream to react to the circumstances of the world, I think is remarkable. I know a lot of us are concerned about the incoming administration, but I'd like to think that your story is one that reminds us that sure, that's happening, but we can all continue to do the things that we can do.
Right, and it certainly does raise big questions for what's going to happen now. But
yeah,
we will run with it and walk in faith.
Yeah, I was curious how much, well, it's sort of related to what we was just brought up. How much has your organization had to deal with pushback from neighbors? I don't know how much you've been in residential areas as opposed to commercial, mixed, et cetera. And if so, like, how have you been dealing with that? How have you been?
Yeah, we have not yet, because we've only been working out of this church and sending people home again. We're certainly, the house in Framingham, the 5-bedroom house, is at the end of a cul-de-sac. And we've talked to her about how will your neighbors respond. And we also had to get very involved in what are the rules? I think if we were in that house, because of zoning,
Yeah.
you know, that we can have the guests, but we can't take money from the guests. Even though a lot of refugees are given a certain stipend. So, but if we're in the big house, that is different, that,
Huh,
yeah, isn't that interesting?
why is that?
So, you know, so then would we put the money into a bank account for them and send it off with them when they leave? So, you know, we just haven't had the house to put that into place yet. But it sounded like all of the neighbors would have been happy with us. Although we hadn't gotten to talk with them in person yet because it wasn't definite. There was an incident with a dog, and so it sounded like, compared to the previous tenants, they might really like that in the neighborhood. So, but yeah, we certainly are aware of, we want to educate the neighborhood, we want to reach out proactively and say, this is what we're doing, and you know, if we were to have a house with like that stage and invite them to people to things, just to, you know, the more you get to know people, the more you relate to them, right?
Well, and I'll just say, you folks already know how to sit down at the table with folks and eat a meal together. And I think that is really powerful, as you pointed out at the beginning. And you know, you guys already know how to do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, that I think the community education piece, it can be difficult to find a platform for that or space for that. And there's, you know, a certain amount of resistance that is obviously going to be roiled up. And so I'm just curious to hear more about how you folks.
Some of our conversation events, so passionate action, we call it. And we usually offer food, you know, that helps. Some we've done at Greater Framingham Community Church, some we've done at our church in Sudbury. Oh, and because we're a nonprofit, we're no longer, never really were affiliated with Presbyterian Church in Sudbury. It's just most of us came from there, but we decided early on to be, you know, we don't want them responsibly financial for us, but they're still very good to us. And so some of our meetings we've done there, it's interesting because, you know, if you want to fundraise, you're going to get a lot more from people in Sudbury than maybe in downtown Framingham. And yet if we want to invite some of our students to attend these things, we don't want to make it so far away as in Sudbury that they can't get to it. So we kind of divide it up.
Yeah. Judy, and your hand up again.
Yeah, just circling back to what you were talking about, collecting sort of rent or money from families. Just in our shelter model, families are required to save 80% of their income, since they're getting like room, board, utilities for free. And that I believe that those accounts they're their accounts, but it's part of the agreement that they sign when they commit to partnering with us, and that creates a nest egg for them to start their independent, you know, financially independent and sustainable life moving forward. I mean, that builds first, last, and security, and that's after paying down debt. So that paying down debt is all part of it. We have comprehensive financial coaching. So our team could definitely let you know how they set all that up.
Love that. Thank you.
That's good input. Yeah. You know, you pointed out overlapping and organizations that great ways that Family Promise model can help inform what you guys are trying to do. Cool.
Are the people that are taking the classes, are they Framingham residents, do you think?
Most of them,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Great.
My downstairs neighbor is from Osage, and he's working so hard as a builder contractor with the other downstairs neighbor that he is not.
Right.
He doesn't speak any English really. And if you speak to him, he'll hold up his phone and then he'll try to read what
Google
is a big help. It's sort of whatever.
Where's Osage?
It's Georgia, near Georgia, between Georgia and.
Oh, okay.
In that version, that region. But I'm intrigued about the program that you have, and I don't know if you know, sometimes they don't pull in until 6 o'clock, so I don't know if you'd be.
Right, and actually, you know, we have talked about, now that all the restrictions are lifted, could we gather around the table again. And we decided not to, because a lot of our immigrants are coming from work, you know, and here they have this awful reputation and they're working hard. So that some are barely rolling into the 7 o'clock class, and we thought to go back to 6 o'clock and try and do that is just too complicated.
So it starts at 7.
It's 7 to 8:30 and we send dinner home afterwards.
Okay.
So, and it used to be hot meals cooked at GFCC, and for various reasons, we are no longer using their kitchen. And so it's still a 3-course meal, but I prepare it in Sudbury and we bring it over with, you know, Serve Safe. So it's no longer a hot dinner.
So then they can heat it up at home.
They can heat it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it's just cold, but
Well, I'll see if I can communicate.
that would be great.
ESL program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's, we start, the first couple semesters were free because we were trying to get our name out. I think it's now 60 or 75, no more than that. And I know some of them are a lot more expensive than that. So for 14 weeks, 13 to 14 weeks.
Well, he's certainly making it.
Yeah. And they like the investment. You know, I think it makes them committed, and it's a pretty solid workbook. So,
Thank you.
Great.
It's pretty inspiring to listen to this. And as I'm sitting here, I can't imagine this being done in Natick, like right now, if you were like looking for a house in Natick, because there's just so much like divisiveness and, you know, mean-spiritedness actually from the immigration policy that came up, and people saying Natick was a sanctuary town, and it is not.
Oh gosh.
You know, I hear what you're saying, Donna, but I think it's partly that those voices are very loud, but they are not necessarily the majority. And there's a lot of maybe kinder souls that are perhaps too quiet, but might get behind projects like this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Doug, on that. I think that sometimes it's easier to be the quiet help, because then you don't have to have the feeling of being personally attacked.
Yeah.
And I always think back to the Underground Railroad, you know, you had to be pretty secret.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, Jessie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely an inspiring story to kick off our new year.
It's been such a pleasure being with all of you.
Yeah, I will ask you separately, or I'll ask you now. With your permission, I'll add your email to our mailing list so you're informed of other speakers and topics that come. You might not have availability to attend yourselves Monday mornings, but you can always check out our YouTube recordings, and we'd certainly, you know, welcome you into our community here. So
thank you.
And Martin, you could probably turn the recording off, since we'll kind of finish up with this topic. I do want to let folks know